The market was alive with noise and movement, filled with the smell of strange food and the sound of merchants shouting for buyers. Stalls were lined with glowing crystals, sharp metal tools, and fruits from faraway planets. Yet, in the middle of all the busy crowd walked one figure who did not belong. He was the alien outcast, tall but thin, with clothes that carried the dust of the streets. No one greeted him, no one offered him shelter. Eyes followed him, some with pity, others with hate. For years he had carried the weight of rejection. He had no name that people remembered. Once he belonged to a clan, but betrayal and failure had erased his place among them. Now he wandered carrying nothing but scars and silence. He stopped near a stall that sold dried bread, but the merchant pushed him away with a harsh hand. Hunger burned inside him, yet he stayed quiet. He had learned long ago that begging brought only more humiliation. That was when he heard a voice soft and clear. "You need a home." He turned his head, confused. Standing before him were two young girls, identical in face and figure. Their hair was tied with simple cloth ribbons, their skin pale under the light of the market lamps. They looked no older than 12, but their eyes carried a strange wisdom. He blinked, unsure if the words were real or if his mind was playing tricks from hunger. "And we need a bride for our father." The second twin finished the sentence, her voice calm but firm. The outcast froze. The marketplace sounds seemed to fade. He looked around, expecting laughter, expecting someone to reveal it was a cruel trick. Yet the girls stood still, watching him with steady eyes. Their faces carried no hint of mockery, only expectation, as if they had searched for him and finally found him. His mouth felt dry. "Bride," he whispered, almost choking on the word. "For your father." The first twin nodded. "Our father is strong, but he is broken. He needs someone to bring him light again." The outcast stepped back, shaking his head. This was madness. Who would ask such a thing in the middle of a market? Who would look at him, an outcast, and speak of family, of belonging? He expected guards to appear, ready to accuse him of something he had not done. Yet no one came. The crowd passed by as if blind to what was happening. "Why me?" he asked, his voice trembling. "There are many others." "Why me?" "Because you are different," the second twin answered. "You carry no pride, no greed. You know what it means to be empty. Our father needs someone like you." The words cut deep, not like an insult, but like a truth he had tried to bury. He had nothing. Yet these children spoke as if nothing was exactly what made him worthy. His hands shook, torn between fear and a strange spark of hope. He wanted to walk away, to disappear back into the shadows where no one could touch him, yet their eyes held him still. There was something haunting in the way they looked at him, as if they had seen his soul before even meeting him. The outcast swallowed hard. "Where is your father?" The twins exchanged a look, then smiled. "He waits, where no one dares to go. If you are brave, follow us." The crowd continued to move. Traders shouted, buyers argued, but for the outcast the world had narrowed to two small figures standing before him. His heart pounded in his chest. This was not a simple offer. It was a door to something unknown. Behind that door could be danger, betrayal, even death. Yet behind it could also be something he had never dared to dream of again. Home. He hesitated only for a moment, then nodded. "Show me." The twins turned together, moving like shadows in perfect harmony. Their steps were light, weaving through the market alleys. The outcast followed, his eyes scanning every corner for enemies. Whispers seemed to rise around him, strange murmurs that made his skin crawl. People moved aside as the twins passed, some bowing their heads, others staring with fear. He realized this was no ordinary family. Whoever their father was, he carried power, enough to make the marketplace tremble at the mention of his name. And yet, his daughters had chosen him, an outcast with nothing. The air grew colder as they left the busy market behind, entering narrow streets where walls leaned close and shadows grew long. The outcast's step slowed, but the twins never stopped. Their small hands sometimes brushed against the stone walls, guiding them deeper into the forgotten parts of the city. Finally, they reached a gate made of black iron, old and heavy. Strange. Markings were carved into the metal, glowing faintly with light. The twins pushed it open together, the sound echoing like thunder in the silence. Beyond the gate stretched a path covered in mist, leading to a place hidden from common eyes. The outcast took a deep breath. Fear gripped him, but something stronger pulled at his chest. Curiosity, hope, the desperate hunger for a life beyond loneliness. He stepped through the gate and the mist swallowed him whole. The twins followed close, their voices whispering in unison. Do not fear. What waits inside will change everything. And with that, the strange encounter became the first step toward a destiny he could not escape. The mist curled around him like living smoke, cool against his skin and heavy in his chest. The outcast moved carefully, his steps slow, his heart beating faster with every breath. Behind him, the marketplace was gone. Before him stretched an empty path lit by faint blue stones that glowed with their own fire. The twins walked ahead with calm steps, never once looking back, as if certain he would follow. Fear pressed on him like a hand. Every instinct told him to turn around, to run back to the noise and chaos of the market. At least there, his suffering was familiar. Here, the silence was too deep, too strange. His stomach twisted with unease. He remembered the years of rejection. How every door had closed, how every face turned away. When he begged for food, they spat on him. When he tried to work, they mocked his weakness. When he asked for shelter, they pushed him into the cold. That was his life, the only life he had known. So why would these twins choose him? Why would they speak of a home, of family, of marriage to their father? The thought felt heavy and dangerous. Marriage was not just a bond, it was trust. It was belonging. And belonging was something he had been denied since the day he was cast out. Could it be real? Or was it another cruel trick meant to break him further? The twins walked in perfect rhythm, their voices rising softly in the mist. Do not fear. We are here. You will not be alone anymore. Their words stabbed through his chest, like light through darkness. Yet he wondered if it was too good to believe. He had learned the hard way that promises often came with hidden chains. The path curved, and he saw carvings on the walls, strange symbols etched into the stone. They seemed alive, pulsing faintly, like eyes watching his every move. The air grew colder. His steps faltered, but the twins slowed until they were beside him. Their small hands brushed against his arm. Our father waits, they said together. He needs you more than you understand. The outcast's throat tightened. Why me? He whispered again. I am nothing. I have nothing. That is why, the first twin said. You carry no mask, no lies. You know pain, so you can see truth. Her words echoed inside him. For years he had carried shame like a wound that never healed. Yet these children called it strength. Could pain truly be a gift? Could rejection truly prepare him for something greater? His fear grew sharper, but so did his curiosity. He had nothing to lose, yet something deep inside him whispered that he might finally have something to gain. The mist parted, and they stepped into a wide chamber carved from black stone. Tall pillars rose into shadows, and a great fire burned at the center, its flames dancing with colors not of this world. The heat touched his skin, but it did not chase away the chill in his bones. Around the fire stood figures in cloaks, silent and still, their faces hidden. They did not speak, but he felt their eyes pierce through him. His heart pounded harder. Were these enemies? Were they judges waiting to condemn him? The twins held his hands, one on each side, guiding him forward. They did not show fear, though the chamber was filled with silent power. The cloaked figures stepped aside, opening a path toward a seat made of stone and metal. It was tall, shaped like a throne, and upon it sat a shadowed figure. His body was broad, his arms scarred, his presence heavy as a mountain. The twins lowered their heads and whispered in unison, "Father, we have found him." The outcast trembled. His knees weakened, his throat closed. Every scar, every moment of suffering returned to his mind. He had been beaten, starved, abandoned, but never had he felt fear like this. This was not the fear of pain, this was the fear of hope. If he believed in their words and they betrayed him, it would break what little remained of his spirit. The man on the throne shifted, his eyes glimmering. In the firelight, they were sharp yet hollow, filled with sorrow that time had not healed. His gaze fell on the outcast, and in that moment the air grew heavy. "You are the one my daughters chose." The voice rumbled like thunder. "But do you deserve it? That will be tested." The outcast's heart sank. He had expected this. Nothing was ever given freely. Everything demanded a price, and perhaps this price would be his life. The twins gripped his hands tighter. "Do not be afraid. We will not let you fall." Their voices steadied him, though fear still clung to his chest. He had lived through hunger, through beatings, through nights so cold he thought he would never wake. Perhaps he could live through this, too. But deep inside, another thought burned brighter than fear. If he survived, if he proved himself, he might finally have something more than pain. He might finally have a place. And with that thought, he bowed his head, ready to face whatever trial awaited him. The fire cracked in the center of the chamber, sending sparks into the shadows above. The outcast stood frozen, his knees weak, while the eyes of the cloaked figures burned into his skin. At the throne, the father of the twins remained silent, his scarred hands resting on the arms of his seat. The silence stretched so long that it felt like time itself had stopped. Finally, the man spoke, his voice deep and heavy. "My daughters tell me you are the one. Do you know what that means?" The outcast's lips parted, but no words came. He lowered his eyes, ashamed of his own trembling. He was nothing. No family, no wealth, no power. How could he be chosen for anything that mattered? The father's gaze sharpened. "You have nothing, yet perhaps that is why you were chosen. Men with riches crave more riches, men with power crave more power. But you, what do you crave?" The outcast swallowed hard. His voice was rough, barely more than a whisper. "A place to belong." The twins stepped forward, their small hands still holding his. They looked at their father with firm eyes. "We told you, he is the one." The father leaned back, his shadow long against the wall. His scars caught the firelight, each one a mark of battles fought and survived. Slowly he nodded. "Perhaps, but a place here is not given. It is earned." The outcast lifted his head, confusion and fear twisting inside him. "What do you mean?" The father's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "There is an offer before you, but it carries a cost. My daughters did not lie. You may stand as my bride. You may share my home. You may carry my name. But to claim that bond, you must prove yourself in the trial." The word trial struck him like a blow. His chest tightened, his hands trembled. A trial meant danger, a test that could break him. Yet part of him felt a strange fire rising. For once his suffering might have purpose. He dared to ask, "What trial?" The cloaked figures stirred, their robes whispering like wind. One of them stepped forward, his voice sharp. "You must face those who mock you, those who see you as worthless. If you survive, you will stand beside our master. If you fall, you will die nameless as you were born." The outcast's stomach knotted. All his life he had been beaten down, laughed at, cast aside. Now they wanted him to stand against enemies, stronger than him, faster than him. He felt the old weight of hopelessness press on his shoulders. The twins held his arms, steadying him. "You are not alone," they whispered. "You have us now." Their voices lit something inside him. He looked at them, saw the fierce certainty in their young eyes. They believed in him more than he believed in himself. He had lived with nothing, fought with nothing, but maybe that nothing made him dangerous. The father watched in silence, measuring every breath, every flicker of doubt. Finally, he spoke again. The offer is simple. Walk away now, and return to your hunger and your loneliness, or take the trial, and fight for a place among us. The outcast's mind raced. He thought of the market stalls where no one welcomed him, of nights spent shivering under broken roofs, of days when even dogs refused to share scraps. He had nothing behind him. Ahead, there was fear, but also a chance. He raised his head and met the father's eyes. I will take the trial. The chamber stirred, whispers rising from the cloaked figures. Some sounded doubtful, others amused, as if already waiting for his failure. But the twins squeezed his hands, their faces shining with pride. The father's lips curved in the faintest trace of a smile. Then it is decided. Tomorrow, at the rise of the twin moons, you will face the trial. The outcast felt his knees weaken, but he forced himself to stand tall. Tomorrow. He had only one night to prepare, though he had nothing to prepare with. No weapons, no armor, no allies but two children who believed in him. The twins led him away from the throne, their voices soft as they guided him to a small chamber carved from stone. A bed of straw, a bowl of water, and a single torch were all it held. He sat on the straw staring at the flame. Fear gnawed at him, whispering that he would not survive, that tomorrow he would die as nothing. But another voice whispered too, quiet, steady, defiant. If he had lived through the endless cruelty of rejection, he could live through this. The twins knelt beside him, their small faces glowing in the firelight. Do not be afraid, they said. You will not face tomorrow alone. For the first time in years, the outcast felt something stir in his chest, something warm, something like hope. He clenched his fists, and for once he did not feel powerless. He had a choice, and he had a chance. And as the torch flickered, the hidden offer stood clear before him. Not just marriage, not just survival, but the chance to finally matter in a world that had long forgotten him. The night passed slowly. Each moment stretched thin as the outcast sat in the small stone chamber. The torchlight danced on the walls, shadows twisting like restless spirits. Sleep would not come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw himself, failing in the trial, broken on the ground while the cloaked figures laughed. Yet when his mind drifted toward despair, he remembered the twins, their steady eyes and quiet voices. You will not face tomorrow alone. At the rise of the twin moons, the heavy iron door creaked open. The twins entered carrying a simple robe made of dark cloth. They placed it before him. Wear this. Tonight you stand before more than just our father. His hands trembled as he pulled the robe over his shoulders. It was plain, yet it felt heavier than steel. The twins led him out of the chamber and down a long corridor where torches flickered against carvings etched deep into the walls. The air was cold, sharp, filled with the weight of something ancient. At the end of the corridor, the sound of voices grew louder. They reached a vast underground arena, its walls lined with stone seats. Dozens of cloaked figures filled the circle, their whispers like a storm of insects. At the center stood a platform of black rock, lit by a pale blue flame. The father sat, high above, his massive frame unmoving, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The twins guided the outcast to the platform and whispered, "Stand strong. No matter what happens, do not give them your fear." The outcast stepped forward, his knees weak, his heart pounding. He could feel the judgment of every eye upon him. Then a voice rose from the crowd, sharp and mocking. "This is the one, the bride for our master's throne. Look at him, thin as a reed, weaker than a child. He will not last a single breath." Laughter rippled through the chamber, cruel and cold. The outcast's hands clenched, shame and anger burning through him. He wanted to run, but his feet held firm. He had made his choice. He would not turn back. The father's voice thundered above the noise. Silence. The chamber stilled at once, the father's gaze fixed on the outcast. "The trial begins now. Face your enemy." From the far side of the arena, a figure stepped forward. He was broad, armored in leather, his arms heavy with muscle. A scar cut across his face, and his smile carried nothing but hatred. This man was no stranger. The outcast knew him. He had once been part of the same clan, the one who had led the attack that cast him into exile. Fear tightened in the outcast's chest. Memories struck like blades of fists of pain of being thrown into the dust while this same man laughed. The cloaked figures whispered with excitement. The trial was more than a test. It was revenge. They wanted him to suffer, to bleed, to die before their eyes. The enemy raised his weapon, a blade curved like a predator's claw. His grin widened. "I should have finished you long ago. Now I will." The twins cried out from the edge of the platform. "No, you cannot harm him." But their voices were drowned by the roar of the crowd. The outcast knew the truth. No one would save him. This was his fight, and his alone. The enemy lunged, the blade flashing. The outcast stumbled back, his body trembling, with fear. Yet survival had been his only skill for years. He ducked, the blade cutting the air where his throat had been. Instinct carried him forward, his hands closing around a broken piece of wood that lay at the edge of the platform. He swung wildly, the wood striking the enemy's arm. The crowd hissed in anger, some shouting curses, others laughing at the sight of a weakling with a stick. But the outcast felt a surge of defiance. He had no weapon, no training, but he had something his enemy did not: desperation. The fight dragged on, brutal and uneven. The enemy's strikes were heavy, each one driving. The outcast closer to the ground. His body screamed in pain, his breath came ragged. Yet every time he thought of surrender, he saw the twins, their small hands reaching toward him, their eyes begging him to stand. And so he stood. He dodged one strike, then another, his body moving faster than his mind could follow. He struck, again with the broken wood, hitting the enemy's face, drawing blood. For the first time, the laughter of the crowd faded. The father leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. The outcast gasped for air, sweat and blood dripping down his face. He had not won, not yet. But he had survived longer than anyone expected. And, in the silence that followed, he realized the dangerous secret of this trial. It was not meant to test his strength. It was meant to break him before he could rise, yet he was still standing. The clash ended with silence. The outcast stood on shaking legs, his chest rising and falling like a storm-tossed sea. Blood marked his face, not only his own but his enemy's. The curved blade that had threatened his life now lay broken across the stone floor. His opponent, the scarred man from his past, knelt defeated, rage and shame burning in his eyes. The cloaked crowd shifted restlessly, some muttering curses, others whispering with disbelief. None had expected the outcast to survive, much less to stand victorious. His arms trembled, his knees nearly buckled, but he remained upright. He would not kneel. Above them, the father rose from his throne. His massive frame cast a shadow that seemed to fill the chamber. He stepped forward slowly, each movement carrying the weight of authority. The crowd fell into silence at once, waiting for his judgment. The twins rushed to the outcast, their small hands clutching his torn robe. Their eyes shone with tears, yet also with pride. "You stood," they whispered, their voices trembling. "You did not fall." The outcast barely heard them. His body ached, his mind swirled, but his eyes were fixed on the figure descending from the throne. The father came closer, and for the first time the outcast saw him clearly. His face was carved by years of battle, lines of pain etched deep into his skin. His jaw was strong, his eyes sharp, but behind that strength was something heavier, an emptiness, a sorrow that lingered like an unhealed wound. When he stopped before the outcast, silence pressed down like stone. The firelight glimmered on the father's scars, each one a mark of violence survived. He studied the outcast with a gaze that pierced through flesh into the soul. "You have nothing," the father said, his voice deep as thunder, "yet you still chose to fight." Why, the outcast's throat tightened. He wanted to say he fought for survival, but that was not the truth. He could have run. He could have accepted death. Something else had kept him standing. His lips parted, and his voice cracked, but the words came, "Because your daughters believed in me." The twins squeezed his hands tighter, their eyes brimming with tears. The crowd stirred, surprised by the honesty. The father's gaze flickered, not with anger, but with something else, something fragile, almost hidden. Slowly he nodded. "My daughters rarely speak of hope, yet for you they risked everything." He turned to the crowd, his voice rising, strong and commanding. "You have seen him fight. You have seen him bleed. You have seen him stand when all said he would fall. He is no longer nameless." The cloaked figures lowered their heads, some reluctantly, others with acceptance. The outcast felt the weight of their eyes shift, no longer seeing only weakness but something more. The father stepped closer, his shadow covering the outcast completely. "You seek a place to belong. Perhaps here you will find it. But understand, this house does not welcome weakness. To stand here is to carry the burden of my name, the burden of my daughters, the burden of my people." The outcast swallowed hard. "I have carried nothing all my life. If I must carry weight now, I will." The father studied him for a long moment, then placed a heavy hand on his shoulder. The touch was strong, grounding, and strangely steady. For a man who had been rejected, all his life it felt like the first sign of acceptance. The father looked to his daughters. "He lives because of your faith. He stands because of your voice. Do you still choose him?" "Yes," they answered in unison without hesitation. The chamber grew, quiet once more, the tension thick, every eye waiting for the father's final word. At last he spoke. "Then he is welcome." The twins cried out in joy, their arms wrapping around the outcast. For a moment, he stood frozen, unsure how to react. But slowly his arms lifted, returning their embrace. His chest ached with unfamiliar warmth, a feeling so strange yet so right. The father's eyes softened as he watched them, but then his expression hardened again. "This is only the beginning. You have proven you can stand, but now you must prove you can remain." The outcast nodded, though fear stirred in his chest once more. He knew this was not the end of his struggle, only the start. The father turned away, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Tomorrow you will be given your place, and with it your first trial as part of this house." The crowd dispersed slowly, whispers trailing behind them. Some spoke of hope, others of doubt. Yet the outcast stood at the center, his heart beating with something he had not felt in years. Sense of belonging, fragile but real. The twins stayed by his side, their smiles brighter than the firelight. "You are not alone anymore," they whispered again. And as the father's shadow stretched across the chamber walls, the outcast knew one truth. He had stepped into a world of secrets and burdens, but for the first time, he would not face it as nothing. He would face it as someone who mattered. The following dawn carried a heavy silence. The underground halls glowed faintly with the light of the twin moons fading into day. The outcast sat on the edge of a stone bench, his hands wrapped in rough cloth to cover the cuts from the fight. His body ached with every breath, but the weight inside him was heavier than the pain. He had been accepted, yet he knew the father's words still echoed. "Prove you can remain." The twins entered the chamber, their steps light but their faces serious. They carried no smiles today, only a quiet determination. One of them held out, a strip of cloth dyed in the colors of their house, deep crimson and black. "Wear this," she said softly. "It marks you as one of us." His fingers hesitated before taking it. To wear this was to claim a bond, to declare he belonged. He tied the cloth around his arm, the colors dark against his skin. It felt strange, as if the weight of a name rested there. The twins led him through twisting corridors until the air grew warm and the sound of voices reached his ears. They emerged into a training ground, larger than the chamber before. The walls were lined with weapons. Spears, blades, shields of metal and bone. Dozens of warriors stood in circles, their bodies scarred, their eyes sharp. Every one of them turned when the outcast stepped forward. At the center stood the father. His massive frame was impossible to ignore, his presence like a storm waiting to break. When his eyes fell upon the outcast, silence covered the training ground. Today, the father's voice rang clear. You will make your choice. To stay in this house, you must prove you are worthy not only in strength but in spirit. He gestured, and two warriors stepped forward. One carried a blade of silver light, the other a staff carved from black iron. They were both taller, stronger, more experienced than the outcast. His stomach tightened, fear rising sharp in his chest. You will fight, the father said. But the fight is not only against them, it is against yourself. You must choose. Do you fight for your own life, or do you fight for the bond offered to you? The outcast stared, unsure. His entire life had been survival. Every step, every breath had been only for himself, just to see another day. But now the father demanded something greater. The twins' voices rose from the side. You are not alone anymore. Their words steadied him. He looked at the two warriors, their weapons gleaming, their stances strong. He had nothing but his bruised body and the fire that still burned in his chest. The fight began. The staff came first, swinging heavy toward his ribs. He ducked, the wind of the strike brushing past his ear. The blade followed, a sharp flash of light. He stumbled back, narrowly avoiding death. The crowd shouted, some cheering, others laughing at his weakness. He picked up a wooden training spear from the ground, gripping it tight. His hands bled against the rough surface, but he raised it anyway. The staff came down again, and this time he blocked, the force shaking his bones. He pushed back, his spear striking out, but the blade cut the tip clean off. Pain burned through him as the staff struck his side, knocking the air from his lungs. He fell to one knee, gasping, the world spinning. The crowd roared with laughter, but then he heard them. The twins. Do not give up. You are more than they think. The outcast forced himself up. His legs trembled, his vision blurred, but he held the broken spear. He charged forward, not with skill, not with strength, but with desperation. His strike caught the staff warrior in the chest, pushing him back. He turned quickly, swinging the broken shaft at the blade wielder, forcing him to step aside. The crowd grew louder, no longer laughing, but shouting with surprise. The father watched with narrowed eyes, saying nothing. The fight raged on. The outcast was cut, bruised, beaten down again and again, but every time he rose, every fall reminded him of nights on the streets. Every strike reminded him of cruel hands that once mocked his hunger. He had survived those days, and he would survive this too. At last, with a cry torn from his chest, he drove the broken spear into the ground, using it to vault himself forward. His shoulder struck the staff warrior hard, sending him crashing to the floor. The blade came down toward his back, but he spun, catching the wrist of his opponent. With all the strength left, in his body he twisted, forcing the blade free and sending it skidding across the ground. Silence filled the training ground. Both warriors lay defeated at his feet. The outcast swayed, barely standing, his body screaming with pain. But he was still alive, still breathing, still unbroken. The father stepped forward. You have chosen. You did not fight only to live. You fought for what was offered, for more than yourself. The outcast lowered his head, his chest rising in heavy breaths. His arms trembled, but inside he felt something fierce, something unshakable. The father raised his hand and the crowd bowed their heads in respect. He is no longer outcast. He is one of us. The twins rushed to him, their voices filled with joy. You stood for us. You stood for our father. The outcast closed his eyes, the sound of their voices carrying him through the pain. For the first time in his life, he had chosen something greater than survival. He had chosen family, and though trial still waited, ahead the fire within him no longer burned alone. The training ground was still, the crowd silent as the father's words echoed through the stone walls. He is no longer outcast. He is one of us. The outcast stood with his body broken and bruised, yet his spirit unshaken. The crimson and black cloth tied to his arm no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a seal of belonging. For the first time in his life, he was not invisible, not nameless. He was someone who had been seen, tested, and chosen. The father descended from his place of command, his heavy steps falling like drums. He stopped before the outcast, his towering frame casting a long shadow across the floor. He looked down at the man who had fought with nothing but desperation and faith. "You have proven your strength," the father said, "but strength alone does not build a home. Loyalty does, sacrifice does, and a bond stronger than blood does." The outcast lifted his head, meeting the father's piercing eyes. "I will give that," he said. "I will not run, and I will not betray what you have given me." The father's gaze lingered, as if weighing the truth in his words. Then he turned to the crowd. "From this day, he belongs to this house. He will share in our burdens, in our battles, in our future." The warriors bowed their heads, though not all looked pleased. Some faces carried doubt, others even hostility. The outcast knew acceptance would not erase all suspicion, but the father's word was law. He had been bound to them, and no one could deny it now. The twins ran to him, their small hands clutching his arm. Their smiles glowed brighter than the firelight. "You are ours now," they whispered. "You are family." The outcast felt his chest tighten with emotion he could not name. The warmth in their voices was something he had long dreamed of but never dared to believe possible. The father's voice broke the moment. "Tonight we will hold the binding. You will stand before this house not as a stranger but as one who has chosen to stay." That night the chamber of fire was filled again, not with the sounds of battle but with a solemn gathering. The cloaked figures lined the walls. The warriors stood silent, and the father sat upon his throne, his daughters at his side. The outcast stood before them dressed in a simple robe of black and crimson. His body still ached, but his spirit carried a strength he had never felt before. The father rose, his deep voice rolling like thunder. "A home is not given, it is built. A bond is not demanded, it is earned. Tonight we forge such a bond, one that ties not only man to house but man to destiny." He stepped forward, placing a heavy hand on the outcast's shoulder. "You were nothing, cast away, unseen. Yet tonight, you stand chosen. Do you accept this bond, knowing it will bring you hardship, enemies and trials without end?" The outcast lifted his head, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "I accept." The twins stepped forward, their voices clear. "And we accept him." The father nodded, his expression softening for the first time. "Then it is done." The crowd bowed as the father spoke the final words. "From this night he is bound to this house, not as an outcast, but as family, as one who carries our name and our burden." The chamber echoed with the sound of voices chanting, their words carrying power through the stone walls. The fire rose higher, flames reaching toward the ceiling. The outcast felt the weight of the father's hand and the warmth of the twins' touch, and for the first time he felt whole. Yet beneath the joy he sensed a deeper truth. This was not an end. This was the beginning of a path filled with enemies who would test him, with battles that would break lesser men. He had won acceptance, but now he would have to protect it. The twins whispered as they leaned close, "You are ours, and we are yours. Together, nothing will break us." He looked at them, at the father, at the house that now claimed him. He no longer felt fear of the future. He no longer felt the emptiness of the past. He had a place, a bond, and a destiny. And as the flames roared and the voices rose, the outcast understood one final truth. His story as a lost wanderer was over. From this moment, his story as a man of this house had only just begun.